we had to be dynamic in our exposure and protect to the downside as much as we could. So a few of the things that we did was to reduce overall equity exposure. We started with levels, just below 40%, and currently, and towards the end of last month, we were more around the 10% mark. So we had a dramatic reduction, and we shorted generic equity markets. Very clearly, you need differentiation. And from our part in our portfolio, we are leading this differentiation via two lines. So the first one is a focus on quality. The uncertainty around what we're living through right now is pretty high. And for most business is going to be extremely testing. For most countries, it's going to be extremely testing. And the second line that we're still using is the theme of the secular disruption. We had those secular disruption emanating from our secular forum that took place in last May of 2019. And for some reason, the pandemic in many ways has pressed the fast forward button on this disruption. And rather than invalidating those disruptions, if anything, it's reinforced them. This is leading us to be more overweight the US, Japan, and China, while we are more cautious and more underweight or even short, depending on mandate, Europe, because it is more challenged according to these filters. In terms of sectors, the three sectors that are clearly coming out of this are technology, healthcare, and biotech pharmaceutical. The normal correlation between safe government fixed income and risky asset has been restored. As such, safe government fixed income still has a role to play in a multi-asset portfolio as a safe haven, as a balance to risky asset. However, let's not fool ourselves here. The potency of safe government fixed income has diminished. And the reason is that the absolute level of yield is much lower than it was before this crisis started. And therefore, the capital gain that you might get on the safe asset is also diminished. We view as emerging market pretty challenged through this pandemic. Of course, their balance sheet is more vulnerable. Typically, they don't have as good access to US dollar than developed markets. And they are also they can also be less liquid. So there we just absent and remain cautious for now. The part of the developed market FX we have kept relatively unchanged throughout this episode, and we remain long the US dollar and short the euro. We view the euro area as more challenged in this pandemic, and one simple reason is that Europe is more of a federation or the Eurozone than a single country, and we'll see how things evolve, but the mutualization of risk is not fully in place yet. Looking at Japan, Japanese equities have extremely resilient balance sheets. We've been talking about this for quarters and quarters. They're probably the most resilient globally, even though they are very cyclical by the nature of their business, but they have, quite an armory to resist for a while. Another area that we're looking at is China. Of course, China started in this pandemic first. There are obviously, tensions in the world. There were tensions before between the US and China. It's unlikely to change. But they are pushing forward a serious fiscal stimulus in what they call infrastructure light or new infrastructure. around 5G, around telehealth, about data centers, electric vehicle charging piles, or things like this, where it's going to be very domestic driven, where we might see some interesting things to do. So the bottom line, I would say, is that this is a marathon. It's not a race. And the DMAF portfolio remains conservative and selective.